welcome to Depth Insights, where we take a depth psychological look at news, topics, and events that are going on in your world today. I'm your host, Bonnie Bright, and I'm also the founder of Depth Psychology Alliance, which is an online academic community for everyone who's interested in the field of depth and Jungian psychologies. And my guest today is Sandy Nathan, who is an award-winning author 21 times over. And I'm really excited about this particular discussion because Sandy is our very first author for the new 2012 online book club, which will be on Depth Psychology Alliance. And each month, that book club will be tended by a different author, and Sandy's kicking us off in January with her book Numenon. Now, just to give you some background about Sandy, she was born into a Silicon Valley corporate family, and so she started her career as an economist and even earned her master's degree in economics. But as she says, once at Stanford's Graduate School of Business, she had a change of heart and really transformed her life and then ended up earning an MA in counseling instead. So definitely a change of direction for her. She has worked in her life as a negotiation coach, a businesswoman, a horse rancher, and an author, all of which that we hope to hear more about because somehow they all make their way into her book, Numenon. So, Sandy, welcome to the show.
Hi, Bonnie. It's really good to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here, and I'm really excited about talking about this book. For one thing, I read somewhere that Numenon has actually won 6 national awards. And one of those is called the Silver Nautilus Award, which recognizes books promoting spiritual growth, conscious living, and positive social change. And I just love that you're writing a book in this category. In fact, what's really interesting about this is your book, this particular book, is a novel. And a lot of us who hang out in the academics of depth psychology are pretty comfortable reading, more of the nonfiction books from which we can, quote, learn something. But better yet is to really be able to take advantage of what you have written as a deeply engaging story. There's so much power in narrative. So I'm really excited that we're going to be kicking off the book club with a novel. And it also has a very interesting name, Numenon. So maybe you can start us off here by telling us where the name came from and how did you come to write this particular book? Because you start out by explaining the story in the book. And for those who haven't read it, it's quite a remarkable account.
Yeah. Well, my dad was a very, very successful businessman on the peninsula before it was Silicon Valley. So basically, the only way that I could go with my life, period, was into business. So there I got my bachelor's degree in economics. I got my master's degree in economics. I ended up in the Graduate School of Business in a Ph.D. program in economics. Economics, public policy, and business was the name of it. So I got in there and I realized for the first time completely that I couldn't do the math, that I wasn't one of these people that was in the 99th percentile in the GRE in math. And not that there was anything wrong with them, it's just I wasn't one of them. So I backed out and I got my master's in counseling, as you said. And that was a huge break because I was really breaking what my family said I was supposed to do. And it was scary. It was really scary. And it's something that I fought to this day. But, I'm someone who's had religious and spiritual experiences my whole life, starting from when I was a little kid riding my horse out in the redwoods. So that's just the way I was, the way I was made. The way Numenon came to be, well, I'd always wanted to write a book. And I tried to write a few books. I tried to write a bio of my dad, and I just couldn't do it. I didn't have the inner drive, the energy to complete it. So in 1993, I had a really devastating experience. I remembered some things that happened to me. It absolutely destroyed my world, my inner world, what I thought about myself and everybody else. It was just awful. And so I worked very hard, and by 1995, I'd gotten myself together pretty well. So I went to a meditation retreat. I have been involved in a meditation group that is founded or based in India since 1975, so I've been doing a lot of these retreats. But I finally went to this one, and it was a 10-day retreat, and I did everything in the retreat. I did all the meditations, all of the chanting, all of the practices, and I started working on both my inner realm and then also reaching out and contacting some of the people that had been involved with what happened to me. And so I came home and I felt absolutely wonderful. It was like, oh boy, was that ever worth it? But that wasn't even the beginning. So I was standing in the shower. Bathrooms are very, very spiritual places. So I was standing in the shower one evening, and I have never heard of such an experience. Maybe the listeners will, but it felt like a lightning bolt hit me in my right temple, crossed through my brain, zapped around in there. There were all these blue and white lights, like Hollywood couldn't even do, And then it went away, and it left a book behind, and it was the whole book. So I went running downstairs, and I typed out an outline of it, and I gave it to my husband and said, I said, what do you think of this? And he said, well, it sounds good. Why don't you make it longer, So 275 pages later, I realized not only did I have a book, I had a series.
Wow.
So Numenon is not that book. Numenon was a little something that I wrote to get us to where that book was. So I have still to get to that. And it just came to me, it's like, it really did look like, in my mind, it looked like science fiction kind of things, or it looked like Hollywood special effects. These things just came up. And so basically Numenon is my life, all the parts of it, but they're all given identities. There's the shaman, there's the capitalist, there's this really nice fellow who rides horses, and there's some great horses in it. And so that's where Numenon came from. Now, I didn't stick entirely to my family's script. I didn't just go into economics and that sort of thing. I went to Santa Clara University when I got my bachelor's degree, and at that time everybody was required to minor in philosophy. So I minored in philosophy and absolutely loved it. Loved it. And it was really a salvation to me because my dad was killed in the middle of my freshman year. He was killed by a drunk driver. So I had these wonderful ideas and these wonderful people that were really a support to me. So I fell in love with a lot of it. So the whole idea of the phenomenon and the Numenon, Immanuel Kant's Numenon, which is the thing in itself, what we can't get to because we experience reality through our senses. So we're continually stuck in the phenomena. That's just something that I love. and it repeats all over the place. When you see the neuroscience studies that people are doing, a religious experience, and it's just there. So that's where Numenon came from. Now my hero, Will Duane, is a very complex person. He isn't anybody that I took from anybody really. He's kind of a composite. But he also, golly gee whiz, almost has a major in philosophy when he goes to Stanford in the book. And so he picks the name Numenon for the name of his corporation just because he thinks it's cool, this kind of philosopher capitalist. And it does enhance his image.
Well, this is all absolutely fascinating, and I'm still kind of stuck back on the story because this has grabbed me so much. In fact, I had goosebumps when I heard you telling your description of how something like this lightning bolt kind of struck you. And, of course, none of us know when these kinds of things are going to happen. I think there's some kind of grace or something that tends to often come out of the blue and provide the kind of experience that Jung, of course, called numinous, which is what I initially related with the title of your book, Numenon. Of course, Jung's term numinous came from someone else. He was writing about things that were holy and sacred around the same time that Jung was actually getting his professional start. But it really sounds like this experience that you had in the bathroom. I love that you said a bathroom is kind of a spiritual place. That had never
They are.
Start paying a lot more attention.
Yeah, well, we're so stripped there that our egos are down and everything's down, and stuff could come in. So it's very good.
That's a really good point. The other thing that your whole story, even the story of your life, the core that it struck with me is this idea of how you ended up going against sort of your family history and the expectations and the idea that you had to be an economist because that's the direction that your family expected you to go in. And, of course, when you think about James Hillman's work, one of his most profound works, in my opinion, is his book, The Soul's Code, which talks about how there's something drawing us forward. It's about the acorn and how every acorn has that blueprint of what it's going to become already encoded in it. And so it just makes me think that there was no other way. There was nothing else you could do but to have this experience and to do what you did and to end up in this place. So it's quite a fascinating experience just to hear you describe that in such concrete terms.
Yeah. When I was an economist, I was the county economist for Santa Clara County. I would stand in the parking lot and I would fight with myself, and I would say, you've signed a contract. You owe these people your labor. Get in there and do it. And I would fight with myself, and I'd make myself go in. I felt like I was dying. I really felt like I was dying. And it wasn't until I got into that counseling program that I felt like I was with my compatriots, really.
Right. Yeah, well, I think a lot of us live our lives under those kinds of shoulds, and myself included. I was in the corporate world for a long time as well, and I just always felt there was something missing. And when I discovered the world of depth psychology, which I had never heard of before, it's like a whole new world just opened up to me. So I'm really grateful to just see. I mean, not like you had a choice, but I'm just grateful to see you pursuing that path with such passion and being able to put this kind of work out into the world where people can not only be entertained by a very good story, but also to, on some level, be exposed to the numinous through your writing. It's almost as if, you're able to pass on that experience of where it all started to the readers through your characters. The other thing is, I really love how, you've described all of the aspects, and you mentioned that it's based on kind of a biographical look at your own life. And there's the aspect of the horse ranching, and there's the aspect of the shaman, and the aspect of the corporate business person. And I see in that examples of archetypes. Each one of these things.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And it's like all the parts of you have come together in this story to make up a whole. And then even the fact that your main character is a male figure, there comes the animus sort of showing up to really live out and centralize the whole story. So it's really great, and I love everything about it. So without giving too much away about the story, because I know a lot of people will want to get the book and read it, but maybe just tell us a little bit about the characters and how they show up.
Let's start with Will, and we'll talk about the shaman next. Will is probably the most complicated hero in history. And one thing that I'm so excited about is about being the book for the book club, for the depth psychologist, is like the first chapter, his psyche is just laid out. There's his anima, there is everything. It's just right there. And I've gotten some really wonderful reviews on the book. Nobody got the pieces, and I didn't sit down and say, okay, I'm going to draw this guy, and here's all his complexes, and this is this and this. It just kind of came out, blah. But it's there, and so I'm really going to be excited about seeing people who recognize what I'm talking about look at it. But anyway, so Will's had a really horribly abusive background. It's driven him into the richest man in the world. He's in terrible pain. He's had some horrible things happen to him in his personal life and also in his business. So he's driven to go to this retreat, which is absolutely the last thing he would ever do. And he can't tell his staff why he's going because he's so guarded personally. He just doesn't tell the truth about his feelings. So he gives them this cock and bull story, which actually happens to be true, too. So there's Will. What the story is actually about is it's about Will and 3 of his MBAs, Masters in Business Administration, his super secretary, her Wellesley assistant, the best chef in the world. This is how Numenon does things. They head off in this caravan of motorhomes to a remote site in New Mexico where the retreat is being held. And so as they drive, they talk to each other, and they're going over a briefing. And this is funny. The book is both fictional and it's non-fictional. I coach negotiations at Stanford. I work for one of the professors there who taught negotiation. And so I was a group of facilitators that he brings like 2 or 3 days a year, and we do stuff with the MBAs and tape them and debrief them and stuff like that. So, so I know how they work. And I have that consciousness inside of me. So I would never think of going to any big thing like they're going to without examining it as carefully as they do in the Ashley. That's Will's fancy motorhome. So that's very, very true. Will himself isn't true. He's a composite. My dad was so successful, and so I had the experience of someone like that. I think he was an extroverted intuitive. That's what I think, because he had the charm, he had the vision, and he could show it to other people, and he could get them to buy into it or hook onto it. And he was more inspiring than any minister I've ever met. And he had all this physical energy. And he also had visions, which is not a well-known thing. For businessmen don't usually talk about that. And he didn't talk about them. I just found out of doing research for the book, dreams that he'd had and so on. So when I was at Santa Clara getting my master's in counseling, the fellow who taught us Jungian typology said, and extroverted intuitives often make very good businessmen. And it was like a firecracker going off in my mind. So Will, my very pained, hurting, and also very intimidating and brilliant hero, he also is this intuitive. So he's looking at the same kinds of things that grandfather, the shaman, is. But they haven't gelled yet. It has to go through a lot more personal work to get to that. So that's what this is all about. I mean, basically, the book is about a whole bunch of really smart people and some just regular people going to this enormous retreat site that practically draws you to it once you know about it. And they're processing out their stuff, and they're just a whole bunch of befores. So it is. Don't expect them to all be fixed by the end, okay? I mean, when are we ever all fixed? Some of them make great strides, some of them don't. So, anyway,
it's nice to have the humanity and the reality in it. And of course, again, when you start looking at the process of individuation, we all go at a different pace. And the other symbolism that I really see in the main character, Will, when you describe him as having both the intuitive aspect as well as the extroverted aspect, what occurs to me is this idea of motion or movement, because he has the vision of where he wants to go or what would work, and then he has the extroversion, which allows him to actually move out of himself and to make things happen. And so there's something coming to me about just the idea of motion, as every good main character in any kind of book is going to need in order to move the story forward, but also playing on this idea of emotion and how he is coming into something new with his own discoveries and having to go or choosing to go to this retreat with the people that he works with in order to get some kind of validation or outcome or something. He wants something to happen, right? It's about the motion of the story.
Yeah, he's drawn to it, and he has all these convoluted, complex reasons that some of them he'll tell, some he won't. But it's something's pulling him to it, too, and the rest of them, too. Even though they can't see it.
I just want to take this moment, too, to also comment on your writing style because it's so compelling. Again, talking about the motion and the vision, I can see it's almost like as above, so below. Your story has been created with that same kind of motion and emotion that we see in Will. If you'll allow me, I would love to just read the first paragraph or two because it's, to me, so compelling, and I think that listeners will love to hear this. He darted across the lawn, fleeing along the lake shore. Treetops lashed the sky and leaves tumbled past him. Looking over his shoulder, he saw the towers of his home stark against the thunderheads. Something was after him. He couldn't see it, but knew it wanted to destroy him. Oh, I think I'll stop there. I don't want to give anything away, but it was, to me, that first paragraph was so compelling. Do you remember how you decided to start there?
It's like I feel Will, too, myself. And so the material that I was dealing with myself when I wrote that, I guess I don't know if it's the shadow. I don't know what it is, if it's existential anxiety, if it's something. Will has this feeling that something's chasing him, and he has to get away from it. And he does what he does in his life in large part to try and get away from it. I don't know. It's like I do it as a gestalt, and it's when a book comes out.
It's emerging, isn't it? I mean, it's really something that you can't always put words to it. That's the hardest thing.
I mean, it just takes over. Like, I've written a series of other books since I've done Numenon, and one of them, the series came from the fact that my brother died. I sort of do literature through disaster, Anyway, my brother died, and I had another huge spiritual experience there, and what came out of it was the book The Angel and the Brown-Eyed Boy, and then the two after it. So it's so powerful when I can't not write these books, It would kill me if I didn't write them. And somebody asked me, well, Sandy, how can you finish a book? Because she'd tried to write a book and couldn't finish it. And I understand that. I couldn't do it before I had that experience in 1995. But somehow it unleashed whatever I needed in me to finish them. And it's a discipline and courage and, mostly just discipline. But the drive is there, so it takes over.
Right.
So,
This reminds me of a quote. See if I can find it here. From Carl Jung when he's talking about the numinous. It relates exactly to that, at least I think. He says, the numinous is the real therapy, and inasmuch as you attain to the numinous experience, you are released from the curse of pathology. Let me read that last sentence again. The fact that the approach to the numinous is the real therapy, and inasmuch as you attain to the numinous experience, you are released from the curse of pathology. Even the very disease takes on a numinous character. So it's almost like whatever you're suffering from, even you in your life, Sandy, whatever you're dealing with, whatever all of us are dealing with, when you are exposed to the numinous in some form, whatever that might be, then anything that you're dealing with actually begins to take on that same kind of numinous quality as well. And I just find that so fascinating. And I think on some level I relate that to shamanism, which is one of my really absolute favorite topics, something that I'm so passionate about. And I have to think that you must have some of that same kind of passion, or you would never have been able to write about this character grandfather in the book Numenon. Can you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that I would have been able to do any of the writing that I complete any of the writing that I've done if it weren't for my meditation practice. Like just before you called, I was just sitting here meditating a little bit, and I could see this sort of golden shower coming up inside of me. It was really wonderful. So. Yeah, in all those years, I did get something. I took I stopped counting when I hit 60 meditation retreats, and I love them. I mean, to me, there's absolutely nothing better than sitting in a meditation hall with a meditation master. It's just bliss. So that's where the shaman came from. He isn't my meditation master, and he doesn't say things that my meditation master, he's not a Hindu. But his being, the light that shines from him, comes directly from me knowing that, and I guess from me too. Yeah, he's really cool. So I've not met a shaman, like a Native American shaman, but somebody read the book and she said, "Oh, you got the shaman just perfectly," because she had studied with a native shaman, and she said that's exactly what it felt like being around him, and that's what he said.
So going back to the idea of the archetype, somehow it seems like this energy has just kind of come through your meditations, and you've been able to tap into that, and as that other person said, become quite accurate in your description and the interactions with the main character, which is pretty remarkable, but I think happens a lot more frequently than we really understand. Not all experience has to come from the outside.
Yeah, I think once I sort of had the plug pulled and allowed myself to be myself, then these things would come more. But they don't come all the time. I mean, it's just years will happen, and then I'll have like this big chunk of stuff come out. And when I was writing Numenon, I also wrote a book called Stepping Off the Edge, which is about spiritual practice, and it's got a lot of stuff about Native Americans in it. So when I was doing it, I would get feelings in my meditation about these historical natives coming in and checking me out to make sure that if I wrote, whatever I wrote was going to be right. So I was very careful in the research that I did.
Well, I have a question for you. Because it's a story about a businessman and a corporation and this coming together or this meeting of the corporate world and the Native American world or spiritual world, I'm curious as to what you think, because you've also been in both worlds. In fact, you kind of have a foot in both worlds. Do you think that given everything that's going on in our economy and in the business world, and we're currently experiencing the protests of Occupy movement, and all of this heightened emotion around what's going on in the corporate world and the greed and all that kind of thing, and as I mentioned, I also have a background in the corporate world, how do you feel this has been received? What do people from the business world think of this? Is it actually an opportunity for them to be introduced to something that's new? Are they willing to be open-minded about it as a general rule? What do you think?
Well, what I've seen in the news is they sure aren't. Yeah, when the book club gets going, there's a couple of additional readings that I want to propose, and one is to see the movie Inside Job, which is the story of what happened in 2008 when all the banks collapsed, disaster struck. It's interesting because when I was writing Will Duane and his MBAs and his corporate structure, I just thought, this is so over the top. Nobody lives like this, and nobody's so rotten. And then I saw Inside Job, and I realized that I'd underwritten it. It was worse than what I could imagine. So, I don't know. My book, The Angel and the Brown-Eyed Boy, takes place in a ruined United States about 200 years from now, and it was the economist in me basically was one of the entities that wrote it, and it's what I think could happen really truly if we don't get past the situation that we're in, and I don't see a lot of really constructive things happening that will get us past it.
You've done a great job in this particular book, and I haven't read your others, which I really look forward to doing. But the theme clearly here is the fact that we are all still very human. We're just doing the best that we can to try to find and live our true selves. And we all come to a crossroad at many given points in our lives where we have to choose, and however we choose is really going to be something that builds our character and leads us toward a path of greater wholeness. It's just as you said, not everybody does that equally in the end. So, but the book is a very compelling story of people's journey.
And the next book in the series, which I have it written, it's 240,000 words. It would be about 1,500 pages. I told everybody's story. It's like I couldn't stop. So I'm going to start rewriting again in January, and I'm going to cut it down to a normal-sized book. But that book occurs when they've reached the retreat. They're there. Grandfather's there. All the people are in play. The God, which Grandfather calls the Great One, is moving. And so that one will show resolution with people. And I think Will has, I won't even say what Will has, but things will get resolved more. I don't know. It's really a conundrum. I think that my character Will is smart enough and he has the discipline enough that he's not going to fall for any political mumbo-jumbo that's really a belief system instead of anything that's empirically defined or backed up. So I think that he would move to a conciliatory thing where we could run the country. But I don't see that happening with a lot of other people. So we have The Angel and the Brown-Eyed Boy.
Right, which is clearly on my list to read next. I have a question for you. What role would you say the sacred, what we think of as the sacred, plays in this whole thing? Because we know that Jung made a visit to the Taos Pueblo and met with Native Americans there and was really clearly struck by his meeting with them. And this whole idea that Mountain Lake, who was the name of the chief that he met with, said that Native Americans felt that whites are always uneasy and restless. He said, we don't understand them. We think that they're crazy. We think they're mad. And when Jung asked him why he thought that, he said it's because they say that they think with their heads, but we think here. He indicates his heart. And so there's just something very precious about that. But it's not that anybody's right or wrong, but I think that there's something, when you choose to bring these two worlds together, which I think of as very representative of, on one hand, what can be sacred, and on the other hand, what can be more profane. Again, we're talking archetypally here because it's never that black and white. There's always good and bad in everything. But what role would you say the sacred plays here? What do you think of when you think of the word sacred, and how does that connect to the Native American retreat that the characters are going to?
Putting it in terms of Numenon, the whole thing is about the sacred wanting out. It's the whole thing. The book is about the sacred. The thing is, basically the sacred. It's so funny how things happen. Right when I was getting this book really shaped up and really ready to go, I found out about a Native American retreat, strangely enough. That was a really long ways away. It was in Tennessee. And one of Bill Miller, who's a Native American, he's a singer. I swear he's a shaman. It's funny, when the natives were given their names way back when, a lot of them got just regular English names. So his name is Bill Miller. His family was given the name Miller. But anyway, so he was the spiritual head of it. And he also sings. He's got 3 Grammys. He's just absolutely amazing. So I went back there, and it was this huge, profound experience for me. The woman who runs the retreat and I just felt like sisters right away, and here I was doing this pilgrimage to get back there. It just felt like a repetition of Numenon, and Vicki felt it too. We had the same thing. We still feel like sisters. And then there was Bill teaching. So it was one of these engineered kind of things that you go, whoa, did that just happen? So, and it did.
Well, one thing that occurs to me, I followed a bit this year the trial for this man. You probably are familiar with the case as well, but this man named James Arthur Ray, who was kind of a guru who was conducting retreats, and several people died in a sweat lodge that he was running. And it was kind of a big trial on several counts. And what it makes me think of is his seeming lack of regard for something that was sacred. And, of course, I can't judge. He was found guilty, and I can't judge because I wasn't there. But certainly I know that as a general rule, our culture seems to have a challenge with projecting onto Native Americans this other. We all have this issue around the other, and what we can't see and can't embrace in ourselves is kind of relegated to the unconscious. And, of course, then we start looking at the other as either the enemy or something exotic, neither of which is good. We have to own those own projections because, if we completely project them as the enemy, then that's clearly not going to help, and it's probably the reason that America was colonized the way that it was a long time ago. But we also can't project onto Native American cultures as the exotic either, because that gets us into every kind of trouble where we end up idolizing.
Yes, right. Yeah, that's just as much of a distortion. So actually, in Numenon, they talk about this topic as they're driving along.
Can you describe that just a little bit?
I don't want to give away the plot, but they touch on lots of things, and it turns out there's a lot of talent that's in the Ashley, which is Will's multi-million-dollar motorhome that's designed by all the best designers. So different people come up that they might have thought were staff, or they might not have thought had anything to contribute. And they hear about things like projection and that kind of positive projection too. Yeah, that's in it.
So just going back for a minute, I meant to ask you, because you had sent me some of the materials that I have in front of me, that in the book Numenon, you talk about how spirituality can manifest in businessmen and women. Is there something more you'd like to say about that, or maybe even if you feel like you're repeating it, just say it again, because this is really, I think, an absolutely critical topic in our day and age. And I think it will be of great interest to a lot of people who are listening to this, because many people, even if we don't have a background in the business world, we are engaging with it almost every single day, and it's certainly front and center in the media these days as well.
Yeah, well, I think it's a matter of just turning the focus of the businessman to the sacred. I was really lucky in having my dad, because he was so inspiring, so I could see that, and he also was very socially conscious. So, I think it's a matter of taking that energy and that intelligence. These people are really intelligent. It was really fun to work at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, and it was fun to work with those professors because they're so smart. So if there's just like a turning in terms of the direction that they're looking at, or the things that they think about, then we can have a real change. I was absolutely horrified when I watched Inside Job, which is the documentary about the 2008 crash. The fellow who did it took a camera crew, and they went and they visited the economics departments of like the Graduate School of Business at Harvard and Chicago, big schools, and they talked to the chairman of these schools, and it was awful. What they were saying, when I was in school, economics wasn't like that. It's gone in the direction of mathematical and away from the words, economics and words and social policy and that sort of thing. And so the mathematics has won, and so what we have is 2008. We have things that are mathematically correct, with derivatives, some of the different things they explain very carefully in Inside Job, so you can really understand them. These are mathematically true and mathematically safe. They are not safe in the real world based on mathematical certainty, and it's not the same thing as real world certainty. So I don't know if that helps at all. It looks like we have a big job.
Yeah, no,
it looks like we have a big job.
Completely. And as Jung said, he said the problem with the rational mind is that we can rationalize absolutely anything and everything, and we do.
Yes.
And I really apply that to a lot of what's going on from everything, from A to Z, that is really not ethical that is going on needs to be looked at in a number of ways. Sometimes it's easy to justify on paper or with the math, as you mentioned, but clearly there's a lot of more soulful work that needs to be done in that arena. So, well, Sandy, thank you so much for being my guest today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm really looking forward to reading your new series, particularly the first book, The Angel and the Brown-Eyed Boy. You have a website where people can find out everything about you, and that's at sandynathan.com. And you also are on social media. You have a Facebook page and a Twitter account, so people can find you there. And then you also do blog sites. Do you want to talk about your blogs for just a second?
I've got a couple of blogs. I've got my own blog. Yeah, and actually you can get to all of them on sandynathan.com. There's a tab there that will take you to them. My personal one, which is sandranathan.net, just to make it easy to find. Then I have another one called yourshelflife.com, and that's for writers. And I do some reviewing. I have all sorts of articles about things. I have an article on Jungian type for writers. The subtitle of the blog is Sanity and Success for Writers, and I'm very interested in getting the writing profession sane, because it's as insane as any I've ever seen. So
great, excellent. We've been talking about Numenon, A Tale of Mysticism and Money, which is an absolutely fascinating read, a fictional read. And again, Sandy is going to be our very first author for the 2012 online book club on Depth Psychology Alliance, which is at depthpsychologyalliance.com. This is a brand new initiative, but the book club will be free, and so we encourage everybody to jump on the Alliance and join us each month. One author is going to be tending the book club, engaging in discussion about their book and suggesting topics for discussion, pointing out themes, fielding questions. And we're going to have a series of teleseminars throughout the year. It's going to be a very, very exciting initiative, and I am definitely looking forward to joining each and every month and reading along and learning from these wonderful authors, including Sandy. So, Sandy, I know a lot of people are going to want to order the book so that they can jump right in on January 1st and be part of the book club and start doing the readings that are assigned and really engage and learn a lot and also just enjoy this wonderful book. Can you just tell us where is the best place to get the book for everybody who wants to order it?
Okay, well, the best place is through my website, which is sandynathan.com. What I have available is a really beautiful hardback, which is a $23 book that I'm selling for $10. If people go to my website, there's a tag that says order, and then that shows all the places you can order the books. Everything is available on Amazon. My books are all available as Kindles for the Amazon Kindle for 99 cents. If you could order through us, Vilasa Press for Numenon, I'd appreciate it very much.
Sandy, thank you so much for being willing to kick the year off, and I really look forward to hearing from you in the new year in January, starting January 1st.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
Excellent. Thanks, Sandy.